All right. Hello, everyone. Guten Tag. Welcome to the Wizard Day in Berlin. And this is a full-day event curated by me, Danning. I'm a data scientist at Flashbots. And
Dobby, I'm head of data at Dragonfly.
we also have another co-host, a boxer from Dune Analytics, and he's still locked in his room for his slides for another 10 minutes maybe. But just a quick intro of the day. We will have a morning session of 4 talks from different data scientists, data wizards from a lot of the projects. And then we'll have a following breakout session for 30 minutes. So I will put a bunch of stickers with different colors around the venue. And if you have questions you want to discuss in one of the track, for example, like account abstraction or interops or maybe PBS, based rollup, feel free to grab a pen and write down the questions. And so then we can collect them, and around 12 p.m. we will collect all the questions, break people into different groups, and so then we can form some discussion. And in the afternoon, we'll have 3 other talks focusing around like data practices and the solutions, and then we'll have another talk covering all kinds of stuff that Uniswap has been publishing, and then also another debate that is potentially spicy about comparing data metrics between Ethereum and Solana. Yeah, so if anyone is enthusiastic about this topic, feel free to come in and jam. And last but not least, around 4 to 5 p.m., we'll have a traditional which is a Ethereum trivia with a lot of questions. Some might involve some data. And then we'll have some mysterious gifts for the winners. And anyone participating will have a reward. So any words from Dobby?
I hope you enjoy, and yeah, let's get the show started.
Cool. So the first talk will come from Kofi. He's a data scientist at Base, and he will talk about account abstraction and everything around it. He has a personal website, which is very popular, called Bondo Bear. So we'll hear from him.
Just 1 second, figuring out how to extend my screen. If anybody is familiar with split screens on Windows. Yeah, there was a button for that, but usually you should be able to. Are you familiar with? So I can have my notes on this side. Very much. Great. All right, thank you for the patience. Go ahead and get that started. Good morning, everyone. Danning already introduced me. My name is Kofi. I work as a senior data scientist on the Base team. And for the past 2 years, I've also been working on a bit of a side project called Bondo Bear, which is a open source database and dashboard tracking the adoption of smart accounts. And this is a tool that's been used by a lot of teams like the Ethereum Foundation for 307 team and Alchemy and Pimlico and lots of other great folk who are working on the account abstraction problem. Since it's early, I'll start with a little bit of a question to check if people are awake. Can I get a show of hands? How many people here have used one of these wallets in the past month? So MetaMask or, Rainbow, Ravi. Okay, everyone in the room, great, fantastic. I'm preaching to the choir. You've all had first-hand experience using EOAs, which is the default wallet type of Ethereum, where each account is secured by a single private key. My hot take for the morning is that EOAs are dead, that they're dinosaurs, and the asteroid is coming, and within this decade, they'll go extinct and nobody will use them anymore. Instead, we're all going to use smart contract wallets, also known as smart accounts, because they make it possible to deliver a 10x better user experience. So again, smart accounts are basically just contracts that are designed to be used as wallets. And because they're smart contracts, they can be programmed with all these superpowers that aren't in the hard-coded feature set of EOAs. So superpowers like bundling multiple step processes into one transaction, or allowing an app to pay gas fees for you, or being able to sign transactions with passkeys and so on. Basically, they enable a Web 2 level of user experience, but then you still get to hold your own keys, which is a great combo that we'd all want to see. At this point, some of you, I'm sure, have been in the industry for a long time. Some of you might be thinking, the smart account idea is old. Why is it going to take off now when we've already had these for so long? So, I mean, Safe launched the first popular smart account product all the way back in 2018, focusing on multi-sig. We've had Argent, we've had Ethereum, we've had Starknet launching with all of their accounts being smart accounts by default. And after all of this time, EOAs are still dominant. That still, has the vast majority of the usage. And I would say that there have been three main roadblocks that have stood in the way of smart accounts getting wider adoption in our community. One of those roadblocks is cost. So some of you will remember that in peak 2021 bull market, it could cost like $100 on some days to deploy a Safe, which is okay for an institution, but not really great for like a regular user who wants to get started. Another big problem has been fragmentation. So I mean, say you're an app that wants to sponsor gas fees for your users. If they show up with a smart account. In the past, 3 different smart account providers might offer you 3 different ways to get that job done, and you don't really want to have to work on adding support for multiple different systems and put money in 3 different gas tanks. Ideally, you just want to work with one system, integrate that, and have it work with any smart account that people come with. So that's been a problem. Third big problem has been high friction. So even if I come to you with a really amazing smart account product, it's kind of hard to convince people to move from their existing EOA to another wallet. I mean, you have to move all your assets. That's a little bit scary. You're afraid to mess it up. So these have all stood in the way. But what's changed is that today, thankfully, we've got solutions to pretty much all of these problems. So we have cheap L2s now, where it costs a fraction of a cent to deploy a smart account. We have ERC 4337, which fixes the fragmentation problem somewhat because it standardizes how gas sponsorship and transaction bundling is done by smart accounts. So for example, somebody building a DEX can add a feature that allows 4337 accounts to approve and swap in one transaction, and that feature will work with any smart account that uses the standard, whether it was developed by Alchemy or Pimlico, or if it's a Safe that uses the Safe 4337 module, you can add that to your Safes to make them 4337 compatible. And lastly, in terms of solutions, we have EIP 7702, which launched during Pectra recently, which makes it easy to turn your existing EOA wallet into a smart account. So you don't need to migrate funds to a totally new address, which is great. So this all seems cool in theory, but I'm sure some of you are wondering whether or not these solutions are actually getting used. So I'll run through a few of the metrics so we can get a good idea of how things are going, starting with 4337. So quick recap, you don't need to memorize all of this. The basic thing that you need to know is that instead of making normal transactions, 4337 accounts make user operations. So that's an object that bundles together the user's intent of what they wanted to do on chain, along with signatures and other information. The user ops get sent to bundlers who package the user ops into bundles that they execute on chain, and user ops can ask a paymaster contract to pay gas on their behalf. These paymasters have custom logic that determines which user ops they will decide to sponsor. So Uniswap could have a paymaster contract that only sponsors user ops that are doing Uniswap trades or something along those lines. And ERC 4337 usage has grown really rapidly since the standard launched in 2023. Right now, there are more than 5 million for 327 accounts that make at least one user operation a month. And I'm doing a bit of a breakdown here of what those millions of accounts are doing, labeling user ops based on the contract that they were calling. When 4327 first launched, I think the first app to drive significant usage was this Telegram trading bot called Grindry. So they're the little orange bump around 2023 October that you see. Then start of 2024, there was this chess game called AnyChess. It was like a collaboration between chess.com and Animoca brand. You could like win NFTs by playing chess games. They drove some usage. Q2 2024, there's a loyalty points program called Earnum that drove a lot of user ops. They were giving people NFTs and tokens to sign up. Q3 2024, there's an RPG game called Block Laws that had a lot of usage. Q4, there was another game called Super Champs that had a lot of usage. And now in 2025, World App, as you can see, they're the big black bar, they're dominating the chart. So World App, I mean, a lot of you will know WorldCoin, right? World App is their consumer wallet app. And all World apps are safes. They were all already smart accounts. In the past, they were using their custom bundling system to bundle users' transactions. But recently, they decided to start using the 4327 standard. So if you've used the World app, any of the mini apps in there, you've already used 4327, and maybe you didn't even know it. The trends that I've seen between all of the apps I just talked about is that all of them used embedded wallets. So it's a very different scenario from the EOA wallet wars that we've currently seen. It's not somebody using MetaMask but for 4327 and going and using that same wallet with a bunch of different apps. Usually it's apps creating wallets for their users and owning the user relationship completely. A lot of the first movers that I talked about were very incentives driven, kind of short-lived. So they would have a bump of usage of people trying to get an airdrop, or like there's some token incentive going on and then they fall off the chart a bit when that incentive runs out. So folk with not so long retention. But now we're starting to see the emergence of apps like World using it that have a longer retention, which is good. In terms of who is bundling these user ops, I talked about bundlers earlier, the ones who take the user ops and execute them on chain. Usually these apps have a direct relationship with a service provider who deploys smart accounts for them and bundles all their user ops and manages any paymasters. So the top bundler usually depends on who the top app at the time chooses to use. So right now, World app, like we talked about, super popular. They use Alchemy to bundle their user ops, and so Alchemy has a huge chunk of the chart right now in terms of who the most active bundler is. Right now, I'd say ERC 4327 is in its early adopters phase. So, we started with smaller innovators pushing usage up, apps like AnyChess and like Blocklords who saw the potential and were willing to take the risk on the new system. And now we're getting adoption from larger players like World who see the benefits now that some of the earlier kinks have been worked out. So that's 4327. Let me talk about the other solution that I was mentioning earlier, which was EIP 7702. The quick summary on that, again, don't need to memorize all of this, but the basic thing is that 7702 introduced a new type of transaction to the EVM called a set code transaction that lets you upgrade your EOA into a smart account. And when I say upgrade, what I really mean is that your wallet signs an authorization that points to a smart contract. And when the authorization is executed on chain with the set code transaction, your wallet adopts the code of that smart contract basically and gains all of its features. So it behaves like a smart account until such a time that you revoke the authorization. And since 7702 went live during Pectra, just recently the number of wallets authorizing a contract on at least one chain has skyrocketed. I mean, it's at 5 million plus now, which looks great, but sadly, most of that is crime. So yeah, it's not exactly how we'd want things to be going. Most of these authorizations have been made by hackers. So these hackers find wallets that have leaked private keys, and then they upgrade them using contracts that are designed to automatically drain the funds out of them. So that big red block is all accounts that have authorized a hacker contract. And to clarify, these wallets weren't hacked using 7702. 7702 just made it easier for hackers to drain wallets that they'd already hacked using other methods. Instead of making like a transaction on each one to drain it, now they can just like make a multi-call on the drain function that like all of the wallets have and just get all of that money at once. So yeah, the top non-criminal contracts that are getting authorized right now Number one is MetaMask's smart account implementation, the MetaMask delegator. Right now, if you use a short list of apps in a certain way, you might get a prompt in MetaMask asking if you want to upgrade to their smart account implementation, but they haven't put like a big upgrade button in the UI that everybody can see just yet. I think that they're still testing out some things before they're ready to, full throttle, give that to everybody. And I'm sure that when they do go full throttle, that will really spike the amount of legitimate 7702 usage that we see. And other teams like Ambire and Trust Wallet are doing great stuff. Whitebit is a centralized exchange that it seems they've been using 7702 for some things. In terms of what these non-criminals are doing, there are 4 main ways that a 433, I always get confused with the numbers. There are 4 different ways that a 7702 account can transact. If the account is 4327 compatible, it can make a user operation. We've already talked about user operations. Or it can have its actions relayed using another system that doesn't involve 4327. You could do your own custom bundling solution. An account can transact by calling its own code in a self-initiated transaction, or, I mean, it's still an EOA. It can just make a regular EOA type transaction. Those are the 4 main ways that you can use these. Right now, there are around 50,000 7702 accounts that are making at least one of these actions a week. And I'm still working on labeling these actions based on the apps that are being used, but you can see some of the usual suspects getting involved, like there's some Uniswap usage, USDT, Rapteeth and stuff. There's some random token farms I hadn't heard about before, like Hanafuda. There's people completing layer 3 quests and getting layer 3 NFTs. So yeah, we're still early. The numbers aren't astronomical just yet, but I'm very optimistic about it. I would say that 7702 is in the innovators stage of the adoption curve. So we've got an interesting case where criminals are acting as the first movers because the tech helps them do their work faster and more efficiently. But the legitimate movers are coming in more slowly because they need to make sure everything is fully secure and safe before jumping in. But we're making progress there. I mean, just last week, Uniswap Wallet opened up the option to upgrade to smart account for all of their wallet users, which is great. So things are going to start moving very fast soon. And I've bombarded you with a lot of stuff, sort of running through all of the existing solutions to the account abstraction problems. But there's still a lot more things in the pipeline. There's still a lot more things to do. Over the next few months, I expect to see 7702 more widely adopted as popular wallet apps like MetaMask make it easier to upgrade. I expect to see new super apps driving a lot more of the 4327 activity, and you should all be looking out for the new version of Coinbase Wallet that's going to be coming out soon and that you can already sort of try out in beta. One thing that I really need is for more apps to add support for smart accounts, because there's no point in everybody upgrading using 7702 or using a 4327 account if none of the apps actually request bundled transactions or sponsor gas, so that you can actually benefit from the features that smart accounts make possible. So for all of the smart contract nerds out there, please don't use transaction origin is equal to sender check. That won't work with most of the accounts that we just talked about. For the app builders, please start using ERC 5792, which is like a new RPC call that allows you to request bundle transactions from wallets. So if you're a DEX and you want to request somebody to do a prove and swap in one transaction, because they have a smart account, 5792 call is how you would do it. And just be mindful of smart accounts, and let's all work towards unlocking all of that potential. There's on the 4337 side, there's also interesting work being done to develop and grow a 4337 mempool, so that instead of having these direct deals between apps and bundlers, apps would just send user ops to the mempool and any bundler could pick them up. Finally, one last thing I didn't have on the slide is that, of course, in the long-term future, we all have this final goal of account abstraction actually being built into the EVM. And everything that we're doing here and learning here, I'm sure will inform that final implementation when account abstraction eventually gets built into the EVM itself. And the big takeaway here is that smart accounts are awesome. The roadblocks to adoption are being broken down, and this is going to change how everybody interacts with blockchains. And if you want to keep track of the smart account revolution, you can check out my dashboard on the topic at bundlebear.com. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for the talk. Any questions from the audience? Anyone who is interested in using smart accounts but don't know where to start? Okay, I have a question. How does all these new version of smart account change kind of like the UX when a normal user using a smart, wallets? Is that basically something that all these wallet provider are basically handling already, or user needs to be aware of some differences?
Yeah, so I mean, it really comes down to the app or the wallet app that's using the standard, because you can pretty much have a user experience that looks exactly the same to using MetaMask today. You just go here and then you click and you make a transaction. Maybe it's just that instead of having to do 3 clicks for 3 different transactions, maybe you only have to click once. And you don't need to pay your gas because your gas has already been paid by the app or paid by the chain. So it can look very similar, but there's also space to really innovate and try new things and give bits of UX that weren't possible before. Stuff like, you don't need to use a seed phrase anymore. We're going to use passkeys for signing, or things like we're going to set up custom rules so that you can say, I only feel safe spending this amount of money this month, and if I try and go over, please block that because that might be a illegitimate transaction. So there's lots of anything that we can program into these accounts is possible. So yeah, it depends on the app builders, but I think that there's a lot of space for innovation.
I have another question. For EIP 7702, have you seen any cool use cases on the horizon that are yet to really be in prod? I know revoke.cash is a cool, now you can do it all in one transaction rather than revoking every contract. Is there anything similar that would be really cool in terms of UX?
Yeah, I mean, Grace from Uniswap will be coming in later in the day and talking about how Uniswap Wallet is integrating 7702. I'm sure they've got all sorts of exciting features that they're going to bundle in there. But it's still pretty early, so I haven't seen that many really crazy implementations of 7702 that are doing something that I didn't expect. And we're still tracking it. I'm excited to seeing what everybody comes up with using the standard, right? But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Before we move on, I'll just remind everyone we have stickers. I'll put them here. I labeled them so you can see, and we'll distribute some. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them up. I guess I'll put them here. I don't know. Oh, doesn't stick. I don't know. How can I do this? I want to stick it so we know which is which in terms of colors. But okay. It's not super sticky apparently. Sticky-ish. Okay, well, we'll distribute stickers, and if you have questions, go take one, write it on there, and come give it to us, or stick it somewhere so we can find it. And later on, during the breakout sessions, we'll look at all those. Next up, we have Shushen from Optimism, who will be talking to us about L2s. So yeah, please welcome Shushen to the stage.
ones. I think this one's still not connected. All right. Okay. Okay. And then refresh. And then okay. Nice. Yeah. Cool. Hello, everyone. So for today's conversation, I'm going to talk about the overview of the L2 ecosystems from an optimistic lens. Yeah, so let's get started. So for the overview, we're going to talk about the current state of the superchain and the L2 systems, and then also briefly touch some intensified bot activities. I think in the next session, Denning is probably going to talk on that more, and then I'll leave some open questions for the audience. So yeah, let's quickly get into it. So for anyone that is not really familiar with the superchain concept, I'm just gonna do a very quick recap. But I heard about this concept around 2 years ago when I first started my job at Optimism and also came to Berlin. So superchain is basically a network of chains that share the bridging, decentralized governance, upgrades, and a communication layer. And they are all built on the open source OP stack. You might wonder, like, okay, so what are the chains that belongs to the superchain where I can even find those information? So there's, if you're like the like nerding out on GitHub, there's actually like a superchain registry where we pull all this information from the superchain config. But you just want to have an overview. There's something called a superchain eco, and that will show you all the number of the superchains, the number of chains that are in the superchain ecosystem. What are they? What are the categories? What are the different stages? What is the revenue share, their contribution, TVLs, throughput, etc. So that's a very nice like front end for you to have a look. And so usually when you say, oh, we have 30 plus chains, how do we even know we're doing well? And recently we actually published something by Michael Silverling. He's not here today. But basically we are always debating internally, like how do we even define the success of a chain? And it's very challenging because there's always constant debate over the metrics because people are also optimizing for different goals. Even for similar chains, they might have different goals and different milestones they want to achieve. So that's actually extremely hard to decide what are the success metrics. I'll go to the next one. And if you haven't read the blog, so I'm just going to provide a quick takeaway, but basically we are just showing what we care about as Optimism Collective in terms of the goals that we want to, or the milestones that we care about in 2025. And I have to specify it because the time frame also matters, like different year we might have like different emphasis on the metrics. And I'll go to each of them because in the blog we actually didn't really go into the exact metrics, but I'll go into each of them and show you what they are representing. So we're going to talk about real economic value, REV, which is popularized by Blockworks, collective revenue, which is how much the Optimism Collective is actually making, and that's not the same as REV. TVL, metrics that probably most of people would be aware of, gas use per second, median transaction fees, and also market share in terms of how we are doing in L2 space as well as the overall crypto. So first of all, I'm going to quickly talk about the REV. What it's measuring is just usually the fees paid by users to transact. And usually for OP stack chains, it's just like pretty much capturing transaction fees, which includes like base fees and priority fees. But if you are talking about like Ethereum, that will include MEVs, and also like for Solana, it's going to be like JITO, etc. So the tips. So the reason we want to use that is because it captures a user's willingness to pay for on-chain activity. And like, for example, if in the future, if OP chains will also capture like MEV, so additionally, it will make the metrics comparable across all the chains. And as you can see here, so on the left is just like a time series, and there are multiple lines here, but right now, like around like especially 2025, or in Q1 and Q2, I think Solana has been like, Solana alone has been like the top in terms of their REVs on a daily basis. And here the metrics are all calculated on a daily basis, trailing 28 days, but we calculate the average.
And as you can see here, even though you've been hearing, oh, L2 has been emerging and there's like lots of activities going on, which is true, but in terms of willingness to pay, Ethereum, Solana, and Tron, they still together make up over like 80% of the total crypto REVs, which is a little bit surprising to me, but also not surprising. And while you've been thinking like, oh yes, there's a lot of transactions and gas use per second happening on Base and also on the superchain, it's still at a super early stage, and they only represent about like 2.7% if you count the total crypto market. So it's still like relatively small and early. Don't know how, yeah, but on the right, there's just like a table that is showing the numbers that are represented in the time series chart here. I'm going to the next one. And then I'm going to just quickly demystify the collective revenue, because sometimes people might equate that with how much revenue a chain is making. To some extent, yes, but collective revenue here just represent the ETH earned by Optimism Collective. And usually we only take the greater of the 2.5% of the chain's revenue or 15% of the net on-chain profit. And that could just be all the fees collected by a chain deducted by maybe like the blob fees and the L1 fees and maybe like some other fees. And usually we assume that OP mainnet would contribute 100% to the Optimism Collective. And the ETH contributed to the collective will be used for like retro funding, ecosystem growth, etc. So as you can see from the latest, the estimated OP collective revenue is roughly around like 13.9 ETH per day. And if I just like annualize it based on whatever the latest value is, that's around like 5,000 ETH annualized. And as you can see, like there's a breakdown in terms of what are the chains that have been contributed the most. So Base, OP mainnet, Unichain, Bob, etc. Yeah, so that's the collective revenue. And also gonna quickly talk about the total value locked as well. This is a metrics that we have some love and hate relationship, because this number is showing like how much liquidity is locked in a protocol, also how much liquidity is locked on a chain. And it shows like the supply side for DeFi ecosystem, but also at the same time, this metric is very subject to, first of all, price volatility, and also secondly, incentive programs. And we've seen a lot of the chains attracting lots of TVLs, but also just went busted maybe after they stopped the incentive program. But we still continue using these metrics because it's widely adopted in the industry, but we would usually accompany that with something like a net token inflow to remove the price volatility that is like impacting the metric. And as you can see here, as of the latest, Superchain is about 5.6 billion in terms of its total TVL, and it's only representing about like 4.9% of the total crypto TVL. And the highest line here, like the darker blue one, is representing the entire Ethereum ecosystem, and that's about that's actually about 60% of the total crypto. So a lot of the liquidity or TVL is actually still concentrated on the Ethereum ecosystem, and around like 90% of that is still sitting on Ethereum L1. Solana is about like 7.7% of the TVLs, and so I think the TVL number is influenced a lot by, say, like what the native token is. Like if ETH is valuable and there's a lot of ETH on Ethereum, yes, but there's also like the stablecoin factors, etc. So that's that. And then is the gas use per second. What it's trying to measure is the average compute consumed on the blockchain, and we want to use this to measure the throughput and also the execution load. Here we are only comparing the EVMs because that's probably the most comparables. It's not super easy to compare, like compute on say like EVMs versus Solana, but we are hoping that we will be able to capture that someday so that we can make this comparable. And the trending line up there is showing the entire Ethereum ecosystem, and the second one is actually Optimism like Superchain. So as you can see, the Superchain ecosystem has been scaling Ethereum in terms of its compute, and we actually doubled the capacity from like 30 million gas per second to around like 70 million gas per second to date this year. And to the right, you can see a comparison of the top 10 chains by their gas use per second. So first one comes with base, and base is still continuing scaling, and then followed by BNB. That's like across the all crypto ecosystem. And the second one is on the L2, what are the gas use per second, and that's like base, OP mainnet, world, etc. I think this is probably the last metrics before we go into like talking quickly about the bots, but that's like the median transaction fee. So from the chain's perspective, like we would like to have like sustainable revenue growth, but also from the UX perspective, we want users to have transactions executed as cheap as possible. So it's like the typical cost for a user to transact, and the lower fees will reduce the frictions and also could potentially unlock any of the broader usage across the industry. We use the median fees to try to like reduce the biases, especially that is like introduced by bots. And as you can see here, the red one, by the way, is not Optimism Superchain, it's actually Tron. So most of the L2s and anything that you know of where people transact a lot on is actually minimal. I don't even bother like pronouncing like, or like speaking out how many zeros are there, but to transact on Superchain has actually become extremely cheap. I think last year we're still kind of like benchmarking against like if the transaction is less than 1 cent, but as you can see here, now we are actually using 0.1 cent to measure like how much a user is paying. So last night when I calculated, transacting on the Superchain is already 300 times lower than Ethereum, and is almost the same on par with Solana. And lastly, I'll just quickly talk about the market shares. I think while I was going through the metrics that we mentioned about, we usually also have a benchmark against how the market is doing. Like overall, I think the performance around like Superchain against the L2s is that it's kind of like taking a leading position in terms of transactions, TVLs, and REVs. But you zoom out and compare to the entire crypto ecosystem, you realize it's still like super tiny and small. Other than, I guess, like the number of transaction shares. In terms of TVL, in terms of REV, is like in low single digits. So there's still a lot to do, just not only for the Superchain, but also for any other L2s that are trying to scale Ethereum. Okay, so let's quickly go into the intensified bot activities. So as transactions are getting cheaper, there's also like lots of spams and lots of bots taking opportunities. Here I'm gonna quickly introduce like 2 methods that we use internally to do some early exploration. None of them is like saying is definite, is correct, but it just like shows you in terms of like a rough scale of how much bot and spams that could be happening on chains when it gets cheaper. So the first one is the so-called qualified transaction. It's not like saying, oh, something is quality or not. But basically what we do is we filter out any of the transactions that doesn't emit a log. I think there's also ideas like whether we can also maybe filter transactions that does not change the state of the blockchain, but here, like this example here is only showing whether a transaction emits any logs, does it do anything meaningful? Like for example, it filters out failed transactions, empty bot transactions that only try to scan what's happening on the blockchain, and also token approvals. So on the, so to that, the one on the left that you can see here is unfiltered transactions, and that shows like 17.1 million transactions per day, and there's a breakdown across the different chains. And then to the right, you see the filtered ones that with the methodology I just mentioned about, and it's like almost halved of what was like compared to the unfiltered one. So this is a brute force kind of methodology that we use here, but as you can see, like once you filter out transactions that really does nothing meaningful on the blockchain, everything just like halved already. And sometimes we might want to use this to see if that's a signal of inorganic growth, and sometimes it's like some early signal that you can use. One thing that pops out here is like, if you look at the one on the left, World was like having like about 1.4 million transactions a day. And like assume that like all the users on World, they scan their eyes, and then if they're real users, interestingly, I think the quality of transactions there on World is actually like less filtered after we apply apply the quality transaction filter there. So maybe it's showing something. And then the other method that we use is like we identify some potential bot-like contracts using the time frequency pattern that they use on the blockchain. And also, so I think we use like the time intervals that they transact, how many transactions that take place within a certain time frame, etc. And it just tells us that on the superchain, at least, like the top transacted contracts that people send transactions to is likely potential bot contracts, and that makes up almost like 50% of the total transactions across the superchain, consumes around 60% of the gas, and also contributed around 70% of the fees as well, because they pay the priority fees. And usually on the L2s, most of the revenue is actually made on priority fees. So that's just like some very alarming stats that we can see. Most of the transactions that are happening right now are originated from or to by bots. So I'm gonna end this presentation with some open questions. I think we discussed a lot about metrics, and then we quickly look at what the current state of all this like intensified bot activities. So first of all, is like, if majority of the chain activities and revenues are coming from bots, should we encourage more of them? I think a lot of the chains are also trying to make profits in order to be sustainable. I think this question is like, yeah, we should not, but is there a healthier way that we encourage bot activities at the same time, but not biasing towards like just all bots competing with each other? And the second question is, if you were a chain operator today, how would you even start bootstrapping your ecosystem? We got lots of questions from some of the OP chains as well, like, oh, how do we become successful? How can we replicate the success? For example, like what Base has done. Had like to date with 30 OP chains and hundreds of L2s, do we even have any successful playbook for any new chains? Or do we even really want that many chains? And lastly, there's so many emerging trends and also new verticals that are coming up, and we should start tracking and improve the data accessibility. For example, like cross-chain interoperability. There's like a lot of analysis done by other data providers talking about like stablecoins and the real-world usage. There's still a lot of mystery that is like, what is the real P2P that is happening? What are, like, for example, Shopify or Stripe? How do we even track their on-chain transactions, and how do we know the adoption of them? And there's a lot of talk about like institutional, like financial institutions coming to the blockchain. I think yesterday there was like JPM and Base doing collaborations. How do we understand like the real-world assets and the, any of the tokenization that is going to happen on the L2 space, and anything else? So I would just like leave these questions with the people, and that's it.
Really nice talk and detailed breakdown of the metrics. Any questions from the audience?
For the likely bot contracts, have you guys been looking at any categorization of those likely bot contracts into like what different types, what do you think are the main types and what the share is between them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So a lot of the bot contracts is actually not really decoded. So we're just like trying to infer from what's happening. And I think most of them are still like trading bots, like that's the super general one. But I think it would be interesting to know like what exactly those bots are doing, what type of apps they're interacting with. I think the one that I just showed you guys is actually just transaction 2. So it's like people sending transactions directly to the bot. But I think the next phase, which is also super data intense, is actually looking at what the bots are doing in the internal transactions. So we have to look into the trace level, but that's super tricky and compute intensive. But I think that's probably going to provide us more insights in terms of what those bots are, what they're interacting with.
I have some follow-up thoughts on that and question as well. So I think like, because I work at Flashbots and we do like try to look into all those bots, what are they doing, and what are type of like MEV are happening on all these like L2 recently. We published like analysis just yesterday, which we saw that like when you look into the traces, we looked into some of them, and a lot of them are on chain blindly searching for arbitrage opportunity, which is a like huge, I would say a waste of like the resources of a block space. But it's a nature of because all these L2 have single sequencer and there's no mempool, and it's because the gas is so cheap, and if you don't compete to search within the current block, then if you wait until the end of the block and you check the state off chain and then you send a transaction, there's no arbitrage left already. And so that kind of pushed the nature of like MEV searching to be on chain instead of like actually checking off chain. And I actually have a question. So from the data we identified, it's like Base have more than half of the gas are basically used by all these spam bots, where we saw them are checking like the arbitrage opportunity across just multiple pools, check 3 times, there's no arbitrage opportunity, finish the transaction, there's no on-chain interaction, actually like only read but no write into the state. Some people argue it's not a problem because they think it's just like the bots are filling up the space that's not used by user. But we do think like it's a problem for the economics of L2 because if you could, save all these gas space for a user, then potentially also you can likely have a real usage. And so I'm curious, like, how do you guys see spam as like a huge problem, or it's just it's like it's like a feature, come with the cheap gas?
Yeah. So I think we think about it from 2 perspectives. Like, say if you're just a chain that is trying to optimize your revenue and you don't care about your user experience, then it will be like, yes, we welcome bots. And to be honest, bot is like helpful for like just like overall like balancing the markets, maybe doing arbitrage to make sure that prices is like consistent. And also, as you can see, like bots actually gives us lots of revenue, especially on the priority fees. However, especially like last year when we were blocked by, I think when the gas use on chain is always having issues with the block fees and also base fee increases because of the spams and congestions. We see like the real use activities are also slowing down a bit because it's expensive to transact, and that's also against the purpose of having a blockchain if we are like much more expensive to say it than if you like pay via your Visa card, for example. So I think it's more about like balancing those 2, but at the moment I think we want to just pretty much like make sure the transactions are as cheap as possible for real users. I wouldn't say like, well, at least from my perspective, I don't think we're trying to optimize for bot activities in that sense. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
A question about the metrics you shared. How do you orchestrate the monitoring? Like, do you use OKR frameworks to set goals, and what's your methodology if you want to share?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the metrics that we shared is pretty much like the OKRs that we are trying to keep ourselves accountable, at least for 2025. And like the process is more about just looking at the North Star metrics or the things that we can infer as real on-chain activities. And I think even a few years ago, people are still talking about like, say, number of transactions. As you can see, it's like pretty fake. Number of wallets is also like really fake. So those are not really showing the real on-chain demand. And that's how we ended up showing the metrics that we just went through. However, I don't think that's static, and that will probably evolve, especially when you publish or democratize, like, hey, these are the metrics that we care about, and maybe we'll incentivize on them. There's always going to be like fake activities or inorganic activities that come up. So yes, like having spam filters will be useful, and also like keep updating your stance or your knowledge in terms of what the metrics is actually representing. And if it's starting to fail to help you to infer the real on-chain activities, I think you should probably, maybe move to something else. Like, for example, even TVL, a lot of people really liked it at the beginning. And as I mentioned before, like a lot of liquidity mining activities could immediately boost the TVL to a level that you can't even imagine. But once you pause them, like usually within 30 days, if you don't have any other real usage, the TVLs will go elsewhere because all this liquidity is always chasing for yields. I hope that answers your question.
Any other question? Okay, I cannot let you leave. I need to put you on the hot seat before you leave. So you have a line here, say, do we really need that many chains? I want to ask the audience as well, like, how many people do we think we need another roll-up? 0 in the audience. How many people think we have too many roll-ups? Yeah, okay. So the question is, I mean, OP Labs kind of, how to say, invented the OP stacks and like encourage more people to like easily deploy rollup. But I guess like based on the metrics you see here right now, like what's, I guess you guys or the team's take on like how can we really, do we really want to like, is it like really make sense to promote like rollup, or how can we really encourage like meaningful, how to say, activities across all these scaling solutions and
Yeah, that's also a hard question. Like internally, we also have a lot of debate on that. Like for example, as you can see, we sort of make revenues from having chains, but also as you can see, the main contributor is only a handful of chains that we are aware of. So I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about, well, that's all my opinions, by the way. But I think at the end of the day, it's not about like how many chains that we spin up. It's actually about like, do those chains provide value to users on a day-to-day basis? Like for example, when you think about what is valuable, you think about it as like, does that make an impact on my day-to-day life? Does it make it easier? Like one very straightforward answer, like for example, when you think about AI these days, it definitely has made a change in our life. And every day when I work, I was hoping that all the blockchains and all the technology that we invented can also make a difference as well. So coming down to this question, I would say, it doesn't really matter if we have that many chains. It doesn't really matter if JP Morgan actually spins up the chain, as long as they're doing things on the Ethereum or whatever like blockchain ecosystem and making lives easier. Also bringing down the barriers for anyone to plug into the financial ecosystem. I think that's a win-win for all of us.
Thanks for the answer. And there's more questions about interops, but I guess we can leave in the breakout. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Cool. Do you want to introduce my talk? Okay, I'll introduce myself. Thank you. At the same time, Dolby made these nice boxes that keep the stickers sticky. So if any questions you guys want to like slap on top of it, feel free, but also we can collect it later before the breakout session. All right, so here's my talk, the third talk for the morning session. The name is State of DEX, MEV, and Order Flow Market. It's very packed with a lot of numbers named here, but they're all, tangled around each other. So pretty much I'm gonna cover a bunch of like, just trends about what are the front ends in the DEX trading side and what are the, MEV solutions that comes up. So the agenda will be something around like, first we'll have a recap of how just DEX evolves over the space in case, people here, some of them may not be familiar with like DEX stuff. And then a review of who is the king of order flow of DEX today on Ethereum. And then we will share like a study on like the pricing comparison, the execution quality across different solver DEX specifically. And then we will look at the different growing use cases trends for DEX trading and across chain as well. And the last but not least, which is a spam study that I just mentioned about like looking into like DEX trading activity on L2. So yeah, this is a classic slide I always slap into my talk, which just a history of how DEX evolved on Ethereum. So started from 2016, 2017, when Ethereum just came out. People started to experiment the idea of like the classic order book model, where you can have a maker, a taker. When you guys have an order that matches with each other, then there's a relayer likely gonna match the order and send it on chain. Initially, there was even like on-chain order book, but then it turns out to be not very gas efficient. So a lot of people, basically all of us, like transitioned towards a off-chain order book and then on-chain settlement. When I say us, I guess I meant like I used to work at 0x, which is one of the DEX trading platform. And around 2018, Uniswap came out with a very innovative model where they say anyone can just like, deposit their assets into this pool, and there's a curve that's automatically priced the assets on the pool. And so now you kind of solve the liquidity issue where everyone's, like limited price in their order is like scattered around, and it's hard to match really with the efficiency. Now everything is unified in a curve. And so that is like kind of like took off for a lot of like basically innovations where anyone can come also deploy assets pool. And so really released the potential of TVL, and there's, more and more liquidity to be traded in DEX. And that's when actually a lot of people say, hey, wait, actually there's 5 different pool for trading USDC and WETH now. We need to do aggregation to actually get the best price for user, because it's possible that like some amount of liquidity sits in this pool and that pool, and sometimes you have to combine them together. And so now the routing problem comes up. And so that's when around 2020, 2021, 1inch, 0x, they all like transitioned from the initial model to actually a aggregator model. And we now have all kinds of liquidity on chain, which includes like AMM, we includes like order book, and also market makers who are used to be like, trading in the traditional markets, now seeing like, hey, all these pricing on chain is quite not efficient, so we will be able to provide a better price. Why don't you quote us? So we kind of call them RFQ, request for quote, and they all sit together as well, like to compete with all the other liquidity. And over time, we have seen more and more market makers come into the DeFi space, including all those, jump trading, Jane Street, Wintermute, those regular ones. And also, like over the years, we have seen people trying to sophisticate the model. So 2022, when CowSwap came out and say, okay, so aggregator is great, but why don't we add another layer of aggregations? Or in another way to put it, I would say it's like every aggregator, they have one specific router that they designed that they are trying to improve. But CowSwap is saying, why don't we outsource this job? And we have a set of solvers. They can come to compete, and we will pick the better one among all the aggregators. So we kind of call them aggregator of aggregators or meta aggregators, as basically they kind of CowSwap enabled like an auction among the aggregators. And followed by CowSwap, 1inch also did that with the 1inch fusion. Uniswap X also was introduced like since 2023. Another, I guess, like specific case would be like MetaMask, which is a wallet provider. They've seen like, hey, we actually, have control of the user entry in the very end of the supply chain. Why don't we take control of that and we just provide a swap function? And user can just stay within the wallet and don't need to go to like a Uniswap front end or anywhere else, and we can charge a fee on top of it. So that was like a pretty, interesting case where that's another type of meta aggregator. They're basically just calling all kinds of aggregator API, and they charge pretty high fee, like 87.5 bips. But people really don't care and like very not sensitive to price. So people actually do trade on them. So that's pretty much the summaries until like end of last year. And in 2025, we have seen more and more DEX are integrating with order flow auction. So it's called OFA here, and it's just like another sophistication down the line of supply chain. And another interesting thing to look out would be how all these Uniswap v4 hooks, which supposedly is a innovation to customize a lot of the liquidity pool setting, can take off. I'm looking forward to see more analysis on that too. So before I start the actual, the data charts and stuff, I want to take a quiz in the audience. Which DEX do you think has the most retail adoption today? Anyone take a guess? Yes? You think it's Uniswap? Yeah, also just want to clarify, like here, when I say like a retail adoption, it means like, I'm talking about the volume that comes from the front end where retail requested, right? Yeah. Someone else, yeah. Radium. Oh, okay. Oh, so that's a good guess. I would say that's more like outside the scope. So here we are talking about Ethereum only. So if you have a guess, yeah. Yeah, we pretty much, so I have an answer, and the answer is based on the methodology by checking on the router that's like, as we know, are used only by their own official front end. So if there's a MEV bots, they usually like gonna have their own smart contract, and then they're like tap into pool directly because that's more gas saving. So those will be out of scope. Sure, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, more guess, yeah. Okay, why? Okay. No, okay, yeah. Because you like the moon, yeah. Yes. Another guess from you? Oh, okay, the same. Okay, they are the moon fam. Okay, cool. So my answer is on orderflow.art, this website that we launched just a year and a half ago. I have to caveat that this data is slightly out of maintenance where we are not indexing 1inch fusion data correctly. So there's a small piece of, chunk for 1inch is missing. But even if my manual checking, combining all those data back, CowSwap is the biggest one so far. So congrats to the Moo fan. Yeah. But one thing I want to highlight here is that it's actually very sophisticated now, where if you see from the left to the right, from the whole user workflow, right? Like, so user enter from the front end. It could be a CowSwap integrator because they do provide API. DeFi Llama Swap also use CowSwap. But let's just say we're coming to the CowSwap front end. They will call a set of like solvers for this quote request, and then solver will provide a quote, and then one of them will have the best price. They will win. They will send on chain, but when they send on chain, they don't directly send to like public RPC into the mempool. They actually have a like a professional service is like called MEV blocker is the one that comes from CowSwap themselves. So pretty much you see all their flow goes into MEV blocker and then goes to some block builders. It's also possible some solver can have a direct integration with a builder and have like agreement of like potentially refund or whatever value kickback. Some people may call it PFOF. So this is just basically a overview of like how this private mempool adoption has gone crazy over time. Pretty much like around Istanbul Dev Connect time, this number was around like 15%, and then now it's up to like 40%. So around basically across all the Ethereum transactions, 40% of the transactions are going through private mempool. Is it good or bad? I think there is both sides. So it's nice that all these application front ends are internalized and trying to recapture and redistribute MEV value, because they now realize, okay, it's actually our retail user and us, like we who have the adoption, are providing all these value to be extracted in MEV, right? And like in the past, it's all just like taken as profits by searchers and maybe bribed to the builder and proposer. But now we want to basically send it to auction it off to like a service, and they might give us a refund, etc. But the bad part is that like all these transactions, when they are not going to public mempool anymore, imagine all the gas estimator like API, how would they even accurately price the coming gas will be? Because all these like basically transaction content will no longer be in the mempool if they're just observing the mempool. So this is another way to look at this thing, which is if I look at all the labeled order flow auction service that is on Dune, and I'm dividing it into like what are the market share by different services, I'm seeing that actually, as we said, like 60% are still in public mempool, and among the 40%, the labeled one like Merkle has 3 to 5%, MapBlocker from CowSwap has 2%, Protect from Flashbots has 2%. The remaining 30% are unknown. So we don't really know who are getting all these order flow. It's likely the biggest suspect is like Blink OFA, which is another big OFA. Could be MetaMask's smart transaction routing, which I believe is called Servo, their own OFA by SMG. But also, I believe a big chunk of it can be, like a searcher transaction goes directly to like block builder like Titan, maybe Beaver, that is trying to basically provide those order flow as exclusive value, and so they can have an edge in the block builder auction. So yeah, this is what's going on right now. And if you look at it in a different way by measuring the retail DEX volume percentage, it's even more prominent. It's around 70%. Everything is going to be private mempool. So yeah, that was a game that is all these like DEX are playing. So with all these, sophistication, all these competition and maturing of the business, we still kind of don't know as, a user, which DEX really have a better price. And you see all these DEX like fighting against each other on Twitter every day, like Uniswap, subtweeted about something saying like, oh, Uniswap X compared to other ones are way faster. And then CowSwap saying like, that's not it. Like, that doesn't mean you have a better price. And then Uniswap data scientist is like, this is the wrong take. And just like, what do I believe? There's a lot of marketing and narratives. So that's basically one of the motivation that why we did the study. So why do we want to evaluate execution quality? As a normal user, you go to a front end, you see different prices get quoted, right? And if you really don't care, you just swap. You even swap within MetaMask. But if you are slightly more advanced, you will maybe open two websites and you're trying to compare what's the price. But it still doesn't really tells you what's actually going to land in your wallet. So borrowing this like mental model from Xerox study a few years ago, it kind of explains how does the price curve goes starting from the time you are accessing the mid price point until like finally you are getting in the wallet, right? So like there's a mid price point for any like liquidity pool or asset, even regardless it's like order book or it's like AMM. And then there's the LP fee, like liquidity provider fee you have to pay for the pool that needs to be deducted. And then there's like price impact. So like the bigger trade size you have, your price goes down the curve more. And so your average price kind of goes slightly worse. And until this point, it's the quoted price. So that's what's showing in the UI. So like that's when you click confirm in your MetaMask wallet and say, okay, I'm gonna trade this 1 ETH to like 25,000 USDC. But you are not getting 2,500 USDC necessarily, because when you submit that transaction on chain, it's likely someone else is trading in the same direction and paid a higher gas fee, and they will access that liquidity first, and they're accessing the same liquidity, right? And your price might slip a little bit. And it's also possible if you send it to a public mempool, a sandwich bot or like a MEV whatever bot, like they saw that, okay, this transaction gonna push the price of this pool slightly. It will cause a, arbitrage opportunity with this one and the other one. I'm gonna do like a sandwich or whatever, like just basically extract value from this transaction up till the point where this transaction will still go through, but you're having your worst price. So that's like your slippage tolerance. So one study we did in 2022 was showing that basically if all these swap transactions are going through public mempool, a lot of them are going through with like the worst acceptable price they signed in the wallet. So the bot's really gonna push your price to the worst point as long as your transaction can like go through without reverse. So that's why we wanna say like quoted price does not mean executed price for user. And we want to actually measure end-to-end what user execution look like. Another thing is all these silver auction platform, they are supposedly basically trying to introduce a competition. But how competitive are these market really is, right? Like Uniswap X has 2 market makers making up 90% of volume, and it's probably not that competitive. And One Inch Fusion is slightly better. There's 3 market maker making 80% of volume. And CowSwap looks like the most decentralized, where there's one top market maker making 25% volume, and the next 5 indies over. When I say that, it just means they are not a native market maker, but instead it's like they're building routing algorithm across AMM. They might integrate RFQ, but they're not market maker, are making each 10%. And so we wonder, okay, maybe CowSwap looks like they might have better pricing, but is that true? So. And one caveat is that, like, when I checked that data like a few days ago as the most refreshed result, it looks like actually one of the indie solver Barter, they actually took over the market maker on CowSwap. So like Wintermute as the biggest market maker on DeFi, or like MEV, also firm kind of was the number one, the one making 25%, but now Barter has actually have 27% now. That's flipping the rank. And like people have this realization now, like it's basically just few market making firm that's dominating DeFi. And this meme I saw on Twitter is like hilarious, just like whatever reason it's Wintermute. Like whatever the price goes down, it's Wintermute dumping. And like people are gonna tag their CEO, and it's pretty horrendous. But yeah, I saw another funny thing was like after this tweet, somebody was like complaining and spamming like the Wintermute account, and then their CEO tweet as in like it's Barter's fault now, so it's no longer Wintermute. So yeah. Some other things we already know about this data set is that when you look across this solver platform, CalSwap, 1inch Fusion, Uniswap X, they have very different liquidity profile. So when you see all the settled transaction, you will see that CalSwap actually routes mostly through AMM, and instead Uniswap X actually routes over 80% of to like private market makers. We kind of know that from the previous slides, but it will mean very different type of pricing behavior and also like asset preference, right? Because market makers, they don't want to market make on like long tail meme coin trades because it's like high risk. If they don't hedge within the next second, it might go to zero. So that's also why we would see that the liquidity profile differs from the asset type as well very much. And like the long tail pretty much are always routed through AMM. And if you go down the asset profile of the list, like ETH, BTC pegged pair usually are more dominated by like market maker liquidity. And so the study we did was basically using two type of assets. One is USDC, WETH, and Pepe. The other one is Pepe because we want to study different profile of the assets. And we compared the historically executed trades on chain for 6 months with a simulated price using the V2, V3 router, simulation against the highest, TVL pool. So there is definitely a limitation to this study, which we are not simulating the complex routing that can be done by aggregators. We're simply comparing with a benchmark that's naive routing through one pool. And at the same time, it's very tricky to estimate the gas accurately. We're basically using like a ensembled approach by looking at the DEX in the block. And if there's not so, we're gonna like just look at the executed gas price. And then so the results shows that this box plot shows all of the solver DEX are showing a pretty much price improvement against the V2 asset, V2 pool for the USDC pair, but barely much for V3. And if you look at the Binance price comparison, it's like negative. But I mean, I don't think that means much because we're only looking at the mid price of Binance. But basically, I would argue this chart could be misleading because you really need to look at the distribution of the trade sides. And then you realize actually, okay, even say, for example, Uniswap X showed almost the negative of V3 execution welfare, but actually a lot of these like negative comes from like small trade size noises in the left side. It's likely because the gas estimation is very tricky when the trade size is very small. But you do see that there is a, universal trend where compared to V2 AMM pool, all these trade sides, when the sides goes up, all these solver platform will perform better and better, and with like over 500 bips improvement for CalSwap, for example. And when you compare to V3 though, it's much less pronounced, the yellow dots here, but still it's slightly showing a positive improvement compared to the native routing. And at the same time, we compare the Pepe pair, and it looks quite different in terms of how the shape look like. It barely is improving compared to V2 benchmark, but it's improving a lot compared to V3. And it makes a lot of sense intuitively because for these long tail assets, most of the liquidity comes from a V2 pool, and that's where they have more depth in terms of liquidity, and it's harder to compete. So conclusion is like it's highly depending on asset profile, that if the execution performance can, they can vary a lot against different benchmark. And overall, all these solver DEX will perform better than naive routing on V2 and mostly V3, but much less pronounced. And especially when the trade size goes bigger, these solver platform will perform better, especially CalSwap. So going down the next chapter, what are the new use cases growing on DEX? And we kind of know that like this, breakdown of all kinds of front-end segmentation shows that over time, DEX front-end has going down, and more like, share has been showing up in the solver model side. I think like in the space, whoever has been, intaking all these, how do you say, narratives, and has more and more realized that like software models aim to have a better pricing. And we have seen like Ethereum Foundation mention that they use CowSwap, when they sell ETH. And we also, I think, saw like Trump family mention that they use CowSwap in the front end. So that's probably a big contributor there. We do see that like for some time a year ago, like there's a lot of like use case on Telegram bots that are taking up a share. But if you look at the pink top trend, they kind of disappeared really quickly. One part is because this chart is mostly Ethereum, and when I examine all these Telegram bots, volume and trend across all the chain, you see all this purple, it's all Solana. And so we know that like this kind of meme coin casino use case mostly are happening on Solana. Some are taking up a little bit on Base and recently on Binance as well. Although we did see that like the highest high point for meme coin trading was pretty much this year in January Trump, and then there was a Libra, which turns out to be a scam around February, and everything has been dying down right after pretty quickly. It was peaking at somewhere around 600 million volume a day, but now it's like below 100 million. But even that volume still is making a lot of profits for these Telegram bots. Like the top bot today is called Trojan bot, and they average around, say, like on a very flat day around like $250,000, and that still projects to 100 million annual revenue. So it's still pretty prominent. Another growing swap case would be cross-chain bridging and swaps. So over time, like with all these rollups comes up, and also a lot of L1s, we do like need to find a way to like cross-chain and like bridge assets. And what a trend I'm seeing is that basically all these bridge now is providing also swap functionality. So you can basically swap like A token from chain A to B token to chain B instead of like like the same assets. Then you do another swap. These are all the major bridge numbers that I can find. Although one thing that's very interesting that I noticed, the first thing was like the layer 0 volume on the lower corner showed a crazy airdrop trend, airdrop farming trend. So like if you look at like the peak volume that quickly shrinked, it was basically the deadline snapshot of like till when you can, your activity can be counted at towards the airdrop. And now it's like trending down very much. I did got some like Twitter feedback saying that like this 5 million per day for layer 0 is not accurate. They're actually making around like 60 million, which turns out to be actually still the biggest bridge volume if we check DeFi Llama. But yeah, I think like cross-chain bridging is another, I guess, rising use case. So it's interesting. One chart is not showing, but it's all good. But basically, another thing I looked in, dive deeper into was like, so what are people cross-chain swapping for? Turns out to be 90% stable to stable. Yeah, so the missing chart was showing basically all these like cross-chain swap are swapping USDC to USDT, like 90% of volume. So I believe part of this could be some, like market maker or fillers or solvers rebalancing their assets. But I would also love to learn more and to see if more educated opinion why that's the case. Oh, actually it's here. Sorry, I just made an animation that I forgot. Okay, cool. Yeah, USDT to USDT, USDC to USDC, which also is exactly actually bridging, not really swap, but they're using the swap functionality. So yeah, another topic I want to cover is DEX swaps on L2s. So we recently did a study that just released yesterday about spam on Base, and we as Flashbots kind of identify that that is pretty much a big limit for scaling for all these major L2. Because if you look at this chart, like Base has been scaling their gas throughput the whole time, starting from 8 million gas per second up to like 35 million gas per second. But if we label all the transactions that are turned out to be spamming, that is not really swapping or doing any interaction on chain actually, but just checking state on chain, versus the actual real transactions, you can see that like the orange is spam, and like they're taking up more than half sometimes, and pretty much around like half of the gas. And you would know that, okay, is it really scaling the gas throughput for retail or like real users? Maybe not. And if we make a metrics called like gas throughput versus effective gas throughput, you can kind of see the ceiling of the scaling right now. And it's not really 35 million gas per second, but it's like around 20 million gas per second. So yeah, like all these infra costs for the, I guess like the data storage and all these like, throughput, where are they, is it really justifying the how to say, the activity from spam? So, and it's a widespread issue across all the L2s right now. Like it's not only Base, but also Unichain, which just launched pretty much earlier this year. And the moment they started to take off in terms of TVL, like there's asset locked on the chain, there's trading volume on chain, the spam activity instantly spiked. So, and this is a GIF I showed on Twitter, but I just took a screenshot here. But you can pretty much see from left to right, this is one block in Base. How did all the transactions filled up the block gas? And in the beginning, there are some like swap transactions that probably move the liquidity. There are some other transactions. And then all the red comes in are just like bots that is like incrementally using the same difference delta every time, but testing out different like amount of arbitrage on chain. Turns out to be no swap, finish the transaction, consumed 1 million of gas, but like, and if you, but not really paying much. Because if you see the black curve on top, it's the gas priority fee income, like the revenue comes in as every transaction comes in, and the ratio of the curve just doesn't really align, right, in terms of the gas usage. So yeah, we published this article. If you're interested, please take a read. And then I have this meme that I didn't want to post on Twitter because that's Jesse Pollock's PFP, and like they want to really scale the chain, onboard next million consumer on chain, but turns out to be next million spam bots. So yeah, that's my talk. Thanks for your listening.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. I'm not so sure how to structure it though. One of the things I'm very curious about is how to identify market maker activity on L2s. And I guess my question would be, what sort of heuristics do you use when you're like writing queries to check whether or not a trade involved a market maker or not?
Yeah, there's like few aspects of it. So like market makers, they can serve as a market maker and quote for RFQ trade on DEX. And in that case, when you check the event logs, right? Usually we saw swap from from Uniswap. But if it's a market maker RFQ trade, it's gonna be something like OTC order or RFQ order. So it's like a different event log that you can filter on. But also these market makers are toxic flow, or like you say like MEV bots who are trading SexDex arbitrage on the top of the block as well a lot of the time. And the way we identify those is, okay, so like there are some manual checks where when you see there's a MEV bot trading, like when you see a swap on the top of the block and you look at it, it's USDC to WETH, it's probably a SexDex arbitrage. And then you saw one of the market maker address is 0x5C7, it's Wintermute. So like there's a list of like labeled market maker address, and if those addresses are involved in those trades, it's likely a MEV bots operated by those firms. But there is actually a lot more comprehensive like list of heuristics to identify how if this transaction is a SexDex. We have a paper coming up with my co-author Faye. So it's pretty much checking if this transaction is trying to access as the first swap of the block of this particular asset pool, and if the asset was listed on Sex, and also if this transaction is paying potentially a bribe to the block builders. Yeah, there's a bigger list. I'll share in DM. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
First off, crazy that you know an address from your head and know what it corresponds to. But I have another question. According to the block and DeFi Llama, currently the DEX to SEX ratio is at around 28%, and it's been grinding up over time. It's two questions actually. Do you think it should go up still? Is there like a level at which you think it doesn't make sense to go up further? And if you do, what do you think do we need to still get going on the DEX space to move people over to it?
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense or not? I mean, I don't know if there's answer to that, but It's nice that DEX volume are going up like, compared to SEX, and I think it's really tied to a lot of like aspects. Like if people really care more about self-custody, they care more like having transaction on chain and like in a self-custody way, there will be more activity moving from SEX to DEX, right? And I think what needs to be taken, especially in this cycle, which is there's a lot of hype around RWA and stablecoin. It's interesting to see some projects are trying to bring like traditional assets off-chain to on-chain. So like you can trade DEX, whatever token that has exposure to gold or like a euro dollar or something. That's likely potentially will move some volume to DEX as well. I think that will be interesting. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other question from the audience?
Thank you. So I want to ask, like, so do you think the SEX app account less of the revenue of the MEV researcher or the builder?
No, that's a very good. I think I'm getting what you're asking. So like compared to all kinds of volume, or like especially among all kinds of MEV type, there is SEX MEV, there is sandwich MEV, there is arbitrage MEV, atomic ARP. And usually because on Ethereum layer 1, there's such a like mature infra of like block builder providing bundle services where when searchers send bundles, they can have revert protection, meaning if their bundle fails, they don't need to pay on chain. And that kind of opened up the competition. And that's why atomic ARP and also sandwich ARP, just sandwich bundle are very highly competitive. And that's why they're paying a lot of bribes to proposer. But compared to that, like SEX is much less competitive because you do need like a lot of inventory holding to actually participate, and that's why they have a higher profit margin. And so that's the context in my head to your question, because you were asking basically if SEX bots are paying much less compared to other transaction type. I think that's no longer the case as much because in the past, like 2 years ago, there was like a research from Frontier showing that like their estimate of how much of the profit paid out to proposer by SEX is 37 to 77%. And in the recent paper, in the recent study we're about to publish, it turns out to be they're paying like 90% now because the competition has been going up more. But it is still paying less than other MBB, yes. Like Sandwich and Atomic are paying like 90%, sometimes 98%, yeah.
But how do you know how much they pay?
Yeah, that's also a very
how much
good,
they earn there from the off-chain side, right?
That's a very good question. It's all estimation. The approach we did was basically like using a Binance markout over a 10 seconds period, and we look at the shape of the markout, and we pretty much just assume that if this looks like there's like a spike up and then there's like plateau and it goes down, we assume basically the highest point is the optimal time when they hedge, and that will be the maximum profit they can realize from hedging. And this doesn't even count hedging cost. It's kind of really impossible to estimate or model across different asset and trade sides that each trading firm, how are they hedging? But we're assuming that's basically the profits of SEX. And then we compare that with the on-chain profit, like the bribe that they paid out. And then that looks like 90% right now, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I have one comment as a solver. So regarding the volume that you've mentioned, yeah. I think from a solver perspective, volume doesn't matter. Actually, you want to minimize volume compared to the rewards that you make, and I mean that's because the more volume you do, the more risk you basically take. So you want to maximize rewards, and I think this is what Wintermute is doing on CowSwap. On the other hand, if you post volume, it's more for Twitter because you want to win over exclusive order flow deals. So by basically saying I do 20% on CowSwap or 30%, you are trying to get a badge for being a great solver and maybe winning order flow deals, I think. So it's just
okay. Yeah, thanks for the insight. Super interesting. Yeah.
And but also towards the direction of centralized exchange trading. I mean, maybe we can talk about this later because this is really something I would like to understand. I would like to understand for those who are market makers, are actually making a profit? I mean, for example, Wintermute on CowSwap, are they making a profit, or are they just trying to basically get a foot in the market? Because I know that like in the last 4 months they made 260 ETH. It's a lot of ETH, but I'm just wondering, are they like pennying the market to get this position, or do they actually basically are able to secure the prices that they're quoting?
I can't answer that right now, but we should discuss in the breakout group. Nice, thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh okay. We have a PM from interview. Do you want to answer now? Well, we should cut it, right?
We are
Let's do the
like
next
25 minutes over time, so
Okay.
it's not your fault. I think it's all of us. We're data people, not professional schedulers. Thank you, Danning. Next up, we've got David from the PBS Foundation, who's got really cool data to showcase on base rollup. So please welcome David to the stage.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, I guess. So today I want to speak about base rollup and total anarchy. The reality is like this is more my journey inside the Tycho world. And yeah, first of all, I want to thank Danning, Lynn from Nethermind, and Donno that kind of discuss with me these topics, and also Brack that is not present from Tycho. Also, thanks to Chris and Pascal to also organize Zuberlin, which is super nice. And yeah, sometimes I go as Sergio Davide, I work at the PBS Foundation, and this work was funded by Flashbots and PBS Foundation. So really briefly, a base rollup, like we already heard about it yesterday, the day before yesterday from Lina and from other presenter. So it's where the next L1 proposer, in collaboration with L1 searcher and builders, can permissionally include the rollup blocks inside the L1 block. I like to think it as a totally permission extension of the L1. The most well-known base rollup is Tycho and operates under a total anarchy model. So what is total anarchy? Okay, total anarchy is kind of messy in the sense that everybody can, like all the searchers can post blocks. And so to give an overview of how Tycho works is you have many users. You can see them as Hello Kitties. They push transactions in the Tycho mempool, and L2 searchers will scan the L2 mempool and will try to attempt to construct a valid L2 block. Once they build this block, they can do two things. One is going publicly and through the L1 mempool. The other is privately sending it to the builder of the L1. And then it works as the L1 pipeline for block production. The problem here is that it's possible that two different searchers will include the same L2 block in the same L1 block. So what happens is that you will have one proposer A that gets executed first, and proposer B that executed second. And what happens is that all the rewards for the block will go to proposer A, but proposer B will get 0. But still, proposer B will have to spend to publish the blob. And also, Tycho uses TE as proving mechanism, and you also have to prove the block, even if the block is empty, you have to prove it. So, like the losing searcher will incur like a lot of cost. So why public versus private? This is quite interesting. Like we can see until December of last year. So from August to December, everybody was just publishing public transactions. So you can get your block included, but it has to have a high tip to the builder, and many blocks will be present in the L1, and so a builder will publish, like, it happens sometimes that you get 3 or 4 blob of Tycho, which actually is the same block. Another thing that is like the cons of going public is that other proposers of the L2 can see your transaction and can just take your priority fee, raise a bit, and win the rewards. Why going private? Private is kind of interesting because so you can use revert protection. Danning was mentioning before what is revert protection. Basically, it's like just I send a transaction to the builder, I want to be sure that my transaction execute in a given state. If it doesn't, it will revert. And what happens is that I will just get my money. Like, I don't even pay for the transaction since it will never land on chain. What is the problem with this approach is that Beaver didn't accept blobs until I think last month. I don't know if they accept it now, but since Beaver has like a good market share, around 30 to 50% of the L1 block building, if you use the approach of going privately, you can't build in all the blocks of the L1, but you build only in 60. So how does it work proposing in Taiko? If you're a sequencer or a proposer, you have to put 150 Taiko as bonds for each block you want to propose. 25 of this Taiko, you get it back once it's proven. Approve, it takes you, like with SGX, like not a really strong machine, it takes you like around 5 to 6 minutes to generate, and you can publish it, you publish it on the L1. And you have like you have 4 hours to prove your own block. If you don't do so, other people can prove your block and you get slashed. So like the verification happens every 4 hours, and when the block gets verified, you get 125 Taiko back. So Taiko proposer economics is like, so an average block gives you like around 1.5 euro. When it is around $3,000, and the best case is that you have 150 Taiko, you propose, and you get it back after 4 hours. So to get your stake back, you with the Taiko that has value 1.5 euro, you have to wait 100 cycles, that is 16.5 days. And also Taiko is not doing really well, and if you want to be a proposer, you have to have around 10 to 20,000 Taiko. If you buy it at $2 and now it's worth 0.46, is not really nice. So PGA in Taiko. So I explain a bit this problem of having multiple sequencers trying to push their blobs. So Taiko doesn't even participate. They just want to keep the chain alive, and I think the architecture was not made in a really smart, not in the most efficient way, let's say. And Taiko proposed a block around every 36 seconds. We can see here, let's see, can you see here? Yeah. All these dots is Taiko, and the dots indicate that is not profitable. So most of the blocks that they are pushing are not profitable. And these other people are sequencer. There is not much competition now, just a bit. Like you can see the red that raise their gas tip sometimes. This is because most likely they lost the previous block and they want to get included, so they raise it. So yeah, as I said, different proposal race to get their block published. Who gets first win, who gets second lose money. And yeah, Taiko Labs is not participating in this, it's just building unprofitable blocks, which is sad. So how to see which blocks are losing the PGA? Here we can see the Taiko scan, the many 063 Taiko address is the Taiko address. You can see I put some Taiko logo. So we can see the top red square. There is the sequencer 0x33 that have a transaction of 1,233, and Taiko has 1. The reality is that if you open the blobs on the L1, they both have 1,233 transactions, but 0x32 gets first, so he gets the reward while Taiko doesn't. Sad. Yeah, I can. No, okay. Proposer A versus Taiko Labs. We can see here the proposer A is mostly profitable while publishing the same blob as Taiko, while Taiko isn't. And they outbid Taiko. Also, proposer B is the same. We analyze it, and there is not really likely that there is an off-chain agreement between proposer, because you can see here these two proposers are the top proposers. They built around 12% of Taiko chain, and they don't compete with each other. Proposer A posts for 20 minutes, then stops, and then proposer B posts, stops, and then so on. So mostly there is an off-chain agreement. So competition is emerging. A new player entered the market around December. He goes privately, sending transactions, which is a new thing. And basically what happens is that he tried, there are different strategies that are happening. One strategy was okay, I check the last proposed block. I take the tip and I raise it of 5%. And after like 3 days, what happens is that this is the answer of other sequencer. They take their last bid and they raise it of 5%. And this goes and goes and goes and continues. But the reality is that sequencer don't want to raise their gas fee, because if they raise it, they are just sending all the rewards to the L1 builder. So here is another, is the 29th of March, so like 8 days after, and is a new strategy. So the builder that is going privately, he randomly choose the tip, and you can see here the competition is so random. Like here are all the blocks of Tycho being built, the tip, and it's totally random. Like it's interesting. So yeah. So proposer rewards. The thing is that not all the proposer can choose the strategy. So do you want to build like a lot of bonds, but then you are tied? Do you want to build a lot of blocks, but then you are tied with the Tycho token? You have to buy a lot of bonds, or do you want to try to race and win the most profitable blocks? So the private builder, like the builder that is going privately, it builds like the most profitable blocks, but it builds much less than the other, while the others. Probably they were part of the airdrop, I guess, or like they had a lot of Tycho for some reasons. They publish much more. The only thing that is always common in all the charts is that Tycho doesn't build profitable blocks. Sad. So, proposer market share. This is very interesting because it's very similar to the L1 block building. Like there are two major proposers, like A and B. And then there are a few other proposers that submits block, but not frequently. We can see that proposer C, D, and E are proposing. They are not like the major proposer, but the thing that is very interesting is that this proposer might be earning more money. And we can see here like the average daily, where like all the proposer with the off-chain agreement were earning like almost the same amount until yeah, in December, early January, like this new proposer joined, and he's the one that is getting the most reward for at least 1 month and a half. So to summarize my work, we took like all the six main proposers, and we can see that the A, B, C, and D, they have an off-chain agreement. They never compete with each other, and they still have like positive earning for blocks. Proposer A earned like 106 ETH, and he has 5.65% of the all the blocks of Tycho. Then one interesting one is proposer E, that doesn't have an off-chain agreement. He earns 10.3 ETH. He almost never build unprofitable blocks because it uses revert protection, Tramite Flashbots Protect. And Tycho Labs lost a lot of money. Like to be fair, they don't lost it only because they were losing the PGA, but also because they don't want to alt the chain. So if there are like there is not much demand. What happens is that they will try, like they will publish blocks even with very few transactions, and yeah, they lost this 2006 ETH. So yeah, super sad. And that's it. Like so, I'm Davide, Serio sometimes, PBS Foundation. My Telegram is Serio. Somebody got the handle before me, I guess. So I have 2U, and the X is 0x Serio. And yeah, I like markets, so. This is my profile picture. Thank you.
Is there any question from the audience?
Thank you. So data doesn't look very good for Tycho. Do you think it's a Tycho-specific problem, or is it generally for based rollups?
It's Tycho. Like they could use revert protection directly. Like for example, even if Beaver doesn't accept your private blobs, what you can do is like you just send private blobs, and at some point, if the chain is going to alt, you publish publicly, and you will lose money most likely, but you're still like okay. But you will like every time you are getting outbidded by the other builders, you will not build because you will just revert. And even if you want to go publicly, you could go publicly. Just enabling a revert protection, you revert on chain, so you spend a bit for the proposing, but then the block doesn't get included in the Tycho chain, so you don't have to prove it. So you don't have double lost.
Thanks.
So yeah, looks like Tycho are losing a lot of money, but it's just based on what the information that you had looked like. Some or all of the losses are coming from getting front run by other people. Have you any sort of numbers or estimates for like the losses due to front running versus the losses just due to unprofitable blocks?
So I think like so the first 400,000 blocks there were no transactions, so they were posting by losing money, and I will say like around 20%, 15 to 20% is where they get outbidded completely by other sequencer. But yeah, I think like I will say 20%. Yeah.
Would pre-confirmations help with this or solve a lot of these problems?
I mean, you lose yes, like you have trade-offs. These problems doesn't happen. You have a leader election, so there is only one person that can sequence, which is the pre-confer. So it actually solves all this problem. There are some difficulties, even like now, like Tycho is moving to this approach, like pre-conf. They announced it, I think, last week. There are 3 parties that are giving pre-confs, but this is a permissioned set. So it's kind of centralizing back this sequencer, which is fine. In the future, they will decide, I think. But yeah, for now, it's losing some properties that were, I think, fundamental to base rollup and Tycho. Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Do you know if there's other base rollups on the horizon, or has the Tycho data been like a deterrent for others for now?
So I think there are some base rollup that are starting. They have different ideas. Like Surge, I think, will be like kind of a showcase. Then there is R1, Rise, I guess. Yeah, Spire. I don't know. Like they are building their base rollup as well. But on mainnet, I think is only Tycho that have like enough transaction to build actually sometimes profitable blocks. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Davide. That was really nice. And now we're going to head into a small coffee break before some breakout sessions. You can pick the one you want. You can look at the schedule. There's different ones. Account abstraction, interops, base rollups, and DEX and MEV. So pick your...
Yeah, please pick up color and write your questions. Slap them here, and then 5 minutes after we'll come back, form a group and talk about the question and ask Wintermere how much money they make. Yeah, so facilitator will basically be the speaker of each talk. You will find them if Coffee, Chuxing, me, and David. And those part will not be streamed, so yeah, goodbye to the live stream. See you later. Yeah. See you at 2 p.m.